Okay, so if you've ever glanced at a language map of Europe, it's pretty much a sea of what we call Indo-European languages. But then, smack in the middle of it all, you see these three little islands that just don't fit: Finland, Estonia, and Hungary. So, how in the world did these linguistic oddballs end up there? Well, that's the exact puzzle we're going to piece together today. I mean, that's the core question, isn't it? These countries are completely surrounded by Germanic, Slavic, and Romance languages, but their own tongues sound, well, totally alien by comparison. They just don't share the same roots. So where on earth did they come from?
You know, this analogy from one of our sources just hits the nail on the head. It perfectly frames the whole situation. Even speakers from these countries feel it. They know they're related, but that family connection is, well, it's complicated. Finns and Estonians can kind of sort of get the gist of what the other is saying, but when you bring Hungarian into the mix, that connection gets really, really faint.
So let's dig into that. What actually happens when this linguistic family tries to get together? As you can imagine, it gets pretty confusing. Yeah, even though they all belong to the same Uralic language family, trying to hold a real conversation is almost impossible. Think about it like an English speaker trying to understand German just based on a few similar words. Now, multiply that difficulty by thousands of years of separation. What you get is pretty much total confusion. And this quote just drives the point home. In one experiment, they played a Hungarian introduction for an Estonian speaker and asked her what she understood. Her answer was blunt and just perfect: absolutely nothing. The connection, at least on the surface, it's just not there. All right, check this out. This table really shows you what we're talking about. Look at the words for hand and water. In Finnish and Estonian, they're practically identical. Kesi and vesi. See? Total siblings. But now, look over at Hungarian. You've got kes and vis. You can kind of see a ghost of a connection, right? A faint echo, but it's super clear they've been on their own path for a very, very long time. To really get why, we have to take a journey. Not just back in time a few centuries, but over 4,000 years back and thousands of kilometers to the east. We're headed to the forests of ancient Siberia. So this is the mother of them all, Proto-Uralic. Linguists have been able to reconstruct about 200 words. And these words, they paint a picture. They tell a story of a people who were deeply connected to the taiga forest. Their vocabulary was full of words for specific kinds of fish, different types of trees, and just the whole rhythm of a hunter-fisher lifestyle. In these Uralic languages, they have this really unique toolkit. Their grammar is what we call agglutinative, which is a fancy way of saying they build these long, complex words by just adding little pieces on the end, like stacking Legos. They have these really strict rules about which vowels can hang out in the same word. And get this, there's no grammatical gender, no le or la like in French. It's just a fundamentally different way of building a language. And here's where it gets really cool. Modern genetics actually confirms this whole story of an Eastern origin. There's a very specific genetic marker called Y-haplogroup N that's passed down from father to son, and it's found in the majority of Uralic-speaking men. It's like a clear genetic breadcrumb trail leading right back to East Asia. But that Siberian genetic signature, it's not the same everywhere. You could say it's a shout among the Nanagassan people who still live in Siberia today. It's a pretty clear voice in the Finnish population. But by the time you get to Estonia, it's faded to just a whisper in their DNA. And that tells a fascinating story all by itself. A story of migration and of mixing with local people over thousands of years. So what was it? What propelled these Siberian forest people on this epic journey all the way to Europe? Well, it wasn't some slow, gradual drift. It was a revolution fueled by technology. So picture this. It's around 2200 BCE. There's this massive climate event, a huge drought that just devastates the Indo-European folks living on the steppe. This creates a power vacuum, a real opportunity. And who steps into that void? Our Proto-Uralic speakers. They'd just shown up in the Altai Mountains, which, crucially, were packed with metal ores. And right there, they came up with an invention that was about to change everything. This was their secret weapon, lost wax casting. I mean, this was a seriously sophisticated technique for the time. It let them mass-produce these intricate, high-quality bronze weapons. We're talking socketed spearheads and axes. They weren't just making tools, they were crafting the most advanced military hardware of their time, a real game changer. And this is a really important point. This wasn't some huge migration of farmers looking for new land. No, this was the lightning-fast expansion of a small but highly skilled elite group. They were nomadic warriors and traders who used their tech advantage to trade with and, yeah, sometimes conquer their way across an entire continent.
So this incredible expansion, which we now call the Sema-Turbino phenomenon, is what spread the Uralic language across Eurasia. But as these groups spread out over these enormous distances, they started to drift apart, not just culturally, but linguistically too. The family basically split into two major branches. One group, the ancestors of today's Finns and Estonians, they took a northern path through the forests. Along the way, they mixed with local European populations and picked up words for things like agriculture. The other group, the ancestors of the Hungarians, they went south onto the steppe and lived a nomadic life among Turkic tribes. Two totally different worlds.
And this is what solves that genetic puzzle we were talking about earlier. The original Magyar warriors who conquered the Carpathian Basin, they were a Uralic-speaking elite, but they were a small group ruling over a much, much larger local population. Over time, the locals ended up adopting the Magyar language, but the genetic makeup of the country, it stayed overwhelmingly European. The language, not the genes, became the thing that carried their identity forward.
All of which brings us right back to today, and to why this ancient family has such a tough time understanding each other.
And here's a wild fact for you. Today, Hungarian speakers actually make up 60% of all Uralic language speakers in the entire world. That distant cousin, after its long and separate journey, actually became the biggest branch of the family.
So there it is. The answer to our puzzle lies in this incredible 4,000-year journey of divergence. You have two groups, starting from the exact same homeland in Siberia, but then they're shaped by completely different worlds. One by the deep forests of the north, the other by the wide-open steppes of the south. And those two paths created languages that are now worlds apart.
You know, if there's one single concept that could capture the spirit of this whole epic story, it might just be the Finnish word sisu. It's this idea of a gritty, stubborn, unbreakable determination, a kind of resilience that just rises up when you're facing impossible odds. It's the spirit that allowed these unique cultures and their languages to survive for thousands of years.
And the story of Hungarian especially leaves us with this really powerful question to think about. How can a language be more resilient than genes? It's just a stunning reminder that our identity, it isn't just written in our DNA, it's written in the words we speak and the stories we tell.